threw three men from the roof of their home. In reaction to that, Palestinians remembered three important figures who were killed by the British mandate in the 20s or 30s. Here is an example where the Palestinian poet
Ses gelmiyor. Lütfen sesi açar mısınız?
Historical and psychological background of this.
Me for society?
Yeah.
You mean like the individual gets dispersed in the collective?
Yes. And they work for the society. They care more about the society.
Yeah. I think people realize that when there is threat, they seek protection in the collective. And we understand that the trauma that comes upon Palestinians, it is not because of what that person did. It is because of his color, his ethnicity, his religion, his nationality. So when people perceive that they are targeted because of their belonging to the collective, so the reaction will be collective. And I think that imperial colonization and imperialism think that they try in many ways to impose individual feelings and individual experiences on people. When they measure psychological suffering in Palestine, they use the individual measurement unit. They distribute the WHO questionnaire for the well-being and count how many people suffer from depression, for example, which finally gives us false data about the prevalence of how many people suffer, but it doesn't account to the suffering of the social fabric of the people. It is easier for the oppressor, for the colonizer, to deal with us as individuals rather than a collective. And I think that our way to best deal with the reality is to strengthen each other in the collective. That's why the person gives to the society. Even if you look at the Palestinian dance, and I think many of the dances that come from our region, the Palestinian dance is the dabka. Maybe in Turkey you have something similar to that.
Yeah, it's similar to halal.
But in the dabka, you connect with the person on your right, with the person on your left. You communicate with someone behind you, someone in front of you. So this is a collective dance, not a solo dance. And I think this is how people see their contribution to the society. We get stronger when we connect with each other. That is also part of our understanding of sumud and solidarity.
One of the Israel's widespread policies is de-identification. What is the effect of rejection of all other identity elements rather than the Zionism on Palestine and excluded Israelis? How do you evaluate this situation in terms of identity?
Say that again, please.
Okay. We want to ask you about the de-identification in Palestine and Israelis who excluded from the Zionist perspective.
The de-identification of Palestinians and Israelis who are
excluded from Zionist perspective.
If I understand your question correctly, you mean that the Palestinians and Israelis who are excluded from the Zionist perspective, excluded in In what way? Like they are not considered to be.
With the de-identification, how their identity affected from this?
You mean by identification the tangible papers of identity, or?
No, in psychological level, like calling them like animals.
Oh yes, yes, yes. I get you. I get you. The dehumanization. I think this is a practice that is a classical practice by colonizers. In order to minimize the cognitive dissonance that they might have about being democratic and enlightened and civilized, and at the same time occupiers, they need to be blind about the humanity of Palestinians. And so many terms have been used to dehumanize Palestinians. In the past, Ben Gurion described them as cockroaches. Ayelet Shaked described Palestinian women and their little children as snakes and little snakes. And Gallant, at the beginning of this genocide, described Palestinians as human animals. The Palestinian women uterus was described as a demographic bomb many times in Israeli discourse. So even before the real acts of genocide, there was a genocidal discourse among Israelis. Whenever we hear this dehumanization, we should apprehend and anticipate that something criminal and genocidal will take place. Also, the calling Palestinians as terrorists, creating a prototype of a Palestinian as a terrorist. So for them, Palestinians are subhumans or terrorists, or they use psychiatric terms to pathologize them. Let me give an example of using psychiatric terminology to diminish the identity and the humanity of or the status of Palestinians. For example, Ayelet Shmuel, an Israeli trauma expert, she said that the entire population in Gaza are sociopath. And another, when Khadr Adnan, one of the people who launched hunger strike many times, actually he is the one who encouraged other people to contribute to hunger strike. He was finally left to his death in May 23. When he died, an Israeli prominent journalist, Eddie Cohen, described him as someone who wanted suicide, that this was a suicide. And this is not restricted to Israelis. Recently, Macron, the French president, he acknowledged the fact that Al-Arabi Ben Mahdi, one of the leaders of the liberation movement in Algeria, who was killed 70 years ago, and the French colonial regime claimed that he committed suicide. So recently, Macron acknowledged that he was killed by the French colonizers. This was not suicide. But to say that a person who has the status of hero, that he committed suicide or he was sick, to pathologize this behavior is an effort to damage his image as a hero. So whether through calling us terrorists, creating negative representations, or subhumans and barbaric, or through giving us pathologizing psychiatric labels, those are efforts to harm the Palestinian humanity and inflict more damage to our character.
And what do you think about pathologizing as a way of avoiding political responsibility?
This one.
Pathologizing as a way of avoiding political responsibility.
For example, in the case of Khadr Adnan, instead of saying that we didn't fulfill our commitment to the Malta protocol, the medical protocol that teaches us how to deal with people on hunger strike. So they say he committed suicide, instead of acknowledging that this was his effort to challenge the administrative detention. They can say he wanted to die. And again, to tell the world by a trauma expert that the society in Gaza is a society of sociopaths, that takes away any political motivation or any political meaning of the struggle of the people in Gaza. And we need to be careful when we deal with the individuals who come to our clinic, because sometimes people who are not conformist with the society are identified by authority figures in the society and brought to our clinic. And the therapist is expected to use his knowledge and his authority to inflict more control and more restraint on that person who is disobedient. So we have to make sure that our power as mental health professionals is not being used to label those who are non-conformist.
So I was remembering a newsletter title. There was a protest in West Bank, and they called it as a suicidal action.
Yes, that's true. During the March of Return in Gaza, several Western media talked about high suicidal rate in Gaza to minimize the responsibility of Israelis in killing us. Also from history, drapetomania was a diagnosis that was used to describe the behavior of some slaves to escape from the homes of the white man, not understanding their motivation to seek freedom. This was considered to be a kind of craziness. Like, why would they escape and risk their life? Sluggish schizophrenia is another diagnosis used by the Soviet Union against the opposition in Soviet Union, the opposition leaders. Even in Egypt, not a long time ago, during the Mubarak regime, someone wanted to run elections, and he was forced into a psychiatric hospital. So there are plenty of examples. Psychiatry and medicine have been used to discriminate against people or to legitimize the discrimination. There is a pseudoscience, phrenology. You have probably heard of phrenology, studying of the skulls, that legitimized that certain nations who have a special shape of skull, they have certain areas that suggest that they are tameable and submissive, and they are best candidates for slavery. This was a kind of medicine and science, phrenology. Eugenics, the study that has to do with improving the offspring of people, eliminating the marron and the debil, also negative terminology to describe people with lower IQ. So that was a science that actually contributed to the horrors that took place in Europe against the Jews and other nations. But we have to acknowledge the horrible practices in medicine, in psychology. Also in psychology, the IQ test was used as a tool to discriminate against certain nations and to serve colonization. Because if these people, another example in Algeria, for example, Antoine Porot, the person who created the psychiatric school in Algeria, he described the Muslim North African as lazy, impulsive, liar, thief, who has suicidal tendencies. And there are a few other names like that, but that's colonial psychiatry. And any argument and any effort and any practice against this is decolonial practice.
And there are major values like humanity, peace, and justice, but it's been more than a year that we are witnessing that these values are disregarded by the Israel and the other nations as well, because they don't care, they don't take action. So what do you think that how it affects to other societies?
Actually, what regarded is something more important than the value system, because values, people can claim that we understand them differently. But what is being disregarded is international law and the Charter of Human Rights. As if Israel has a special charter that is different than other nations' charter. And I think that shakes, for people who are watching the televised genocide in Gaza and seeing the impunity and the lack of ability of the world to stop this, I think it shakes our value system. It shakes the value system of those who watch, of those who believed that human rights and international law should apply to everybody. But when we see this exception, when we see that people can do all of this on direct without any consequences, first, this can be repeated in other places in the world. Second, it really makes clear that when human rights are not implemented, it is either that Israel has a special charter and definitions and a special law that is different than other nations, or that Palestinians are of a different humanity. They are less than humans. It doesn't apply to them. So it is very polarizing to the world. What's happening in Palestine doesn't only belong to Palestinians. It is very polarizing. It has global reverberations. And it has a vicarious trauma impact outside Palestine. And everyone should be concerned. Everyone should be concerned. It shakes our belief system in humanity, peace, and justice, as you said.
Also, we want to talk about how can you define the evilness of the Zionist regime, because in philosophy there is absolute evil as a term, but how can we define, because evilness is not sound enough. You have the sadistic violence article on that.
Yes. Really, I believe that any colonialism will take place with a lot of evil, with a lot of violence. What is different in the case of Israel is the international silence about it and the duration. This has been going on for so long, and the world has not been effective in stopping it. And to still observe that there are important Western powers who keep legitimizing this and giving it support it makes me believe that the world is a very dangerous place. By the way, Palestinians don't view that their enemies are only Israelis. I think that any Palestinian will feel the same thing regarding the United States and the government of the United States, I mean, the administration that has been supporting Israel unrelentlessly and using a rhetoric and a discourse that is very, very dangerous. We also, the governments in the UK, France, Italy, also Australia and Canada to a certain extent, who have been implicit in this. So the international silence, the silence of Western, to be specific, the silence of Western governments and their support of Israel has let all that evil, all that cruelty to be unleashed. And I think this is very dangerous for us immediately, but also this is going to be very dangerous for Israelis. The moral degradation, the moral decay that we are observing within the Israeli society is also unprecedented. Just before the events of October the 7th, there were some Israeli historians speaking, like unearthing the history of certain massacres that took place in 48. There was a film published about Tantura and the parking lot that was built on the bodies of the people who were killed in Tantura. And for the people who didn't know the history of Palestine, they were kind of stunned and astonished that did that really take place? Even Israelis themselves, they thought that was like there were some opinions within the Israeli society condemning the behaviors of the past. But actually what they are doing now in Gaza is much worse. The details, the everyday accounts that we listen to, they expose sadism and evil that is larger in scale and more gruesome in details. When footages of sexual assaults were released from Israeli prisons, from Sdei Timan, for me, the reaction of the Israelis who went to help the accused soldiers, and there was a public opinion among Israelis that showed that 68% of the Israeli society support these acts. That was shocking, more than the footages. The fact that there is a large majority who support these acts. And by the way, a couple of words about Sdei Timan and torture. I want to tell you, colleagues, that I'm trained on the Istanbul protocol for the medical and psychological documentation of torture by the Istanbul Human Rights Foundation. And I've been implementing the protocols and training other colleagues to do them. But I want to say that Guantanamo, which is an infamous prison, which has bad reputation for human rights violation, I think that 9 people over 25 years died in Guantanamo, while 45 people were killed were tortured to death in Sdei Timan. Some of these people are doctors and health professionals. Over the past year, more than 60 Palestinians died under torture. So the events are very rapid and there are piles of crimes, and it is not within our capacity to uncover all these important stories. And we know that history can be written by the most powerful. And this genocide was started with big lies about rapes and beheading babies and cooking a boy in the oven. They started with lies. And what we are trying to do in Palestine is to collect the micro stories so that we will compose a narrative in opposition to the mega Western media that is creating a huge influx against the representations of Palestinians. And this is a very difficult work to do. But this work is very important, because if we don't document our cases, if we don't write and share our stories, the false history will be written by the powerful and by those who implement evil.
And also, I want to ask you, do you think that this evilness can spread because of the exceptional position of Israel and laws are not applicable to the other side of the world? Because people believe that if you can do something bad and nothing happens, we are witnessing it.
Of course, this can be, they can set a very bad example in the world. And if Israel gets away with it, why don't other tyrants in the world decide to do something similar and get away with it?
So there is a moral issue waiting for us in the future.
Of course. We already observe that the United States supported the International Court of Justice when they wanted to investigate the Russian attack on Ukraine. But now they are denying any acknowledgement or support to the International Court of Justice when they want to, in facing the consequences of the Israeli, the genocide of the Palestinians. So that hypocrisy will disturb the peace of the world, will shake the few tools, international tools, that can create some balance. We are in a very evil world, actually, and this is being unrevealed by the international science about the behavior of Israel.
And now I want to ask you about Turkish society. There are mainly three-way attitude towards the Palestinian issue in Turkey. There are defenders who protest and boycott, and there are those who remain silent because of not labeled as like Islamists, Arab lovers, or excluded from their social parts. And also there are those who spew anger, just similar other parts of the world, like saying they shouldn't put their children under bombs, they shouldn't sold their land.
Blaming the victim.
Yeah, and they are terrorists. So from this perspective, how do you evaluate widespread approaches in Turkish society?
Listen, I can speak about the Palestinians. I'm an expert on the Palestinian reality. I cannot speak for the Turkish society, but I think that in general, in the world, people might be disturbed by what's taking place in Palestine to the point that they don't want to deal with it. They dissociate. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to learn more about it. They don't want to see images because it is too much for their minds. But that will not change the reality. And that will make people lose part of their humanity. Blaming the victim is something that can be influenced by mainstream media, because this is a common thing in dealing with the Palestinian reality. They blame the Palestinians for bringing it upon themselves, as if history started on October the 7th, and as if what Palestinians did legitimizes the reaction. Imagine, for example, if there were the attacks on the Bataclan in France, And the people who did it, they came from Molenbeek in Brussels. Imagine if the French government would go and erase Molenbeek. Imagine if, in reaction to the IRA, the Irish resistance, behavior towards the British, they will go and erase the place where they come from. So I think people need to learn about other examples in the world in order to measure their words about Palestinians. Every nation that experienced colonization takes place with a lot of violence. So to respond to that in a reflexive violence sometimes is only the expected. We come from the health profession. If a woman is exposed to someone who's trying to rape her, would we condemn her for scratching the rapist, for pushing him back? It's only expected. That's a human reflex. This is not a recommendation that I make, but this is a reasonable understanding of the reality of what's taking place in Palestine. But let me focus on more positive examples with Turkey. I want to tell you that I used to go to Gaza to train colleagues there, and I took a photo. I don't know if I still have that photo. I took a photo near the monument of Marmara victims. In Gaza, on the beach, there is a beautiful monument that commemorates the Marmara victims, the Turkish victims who came in support of Palestine, and they were brutalized and killed by Israelis. I think Israelis have created suffering and mourning and loss in many nations in the world. I want also to tell you, you probably know, but there are certain places in Jerusalem, like schools and historical places in the old city of Jerusalem, that are still being maintained by Turkey and supported by Turkey. They are part of the Ottoman presence in Jerusalem, and they keep maintaining them. I think we have enough material and experiences in our history that builds bonds and solidarity. And even without, we don't need to be from the same kinship or from the same religion or from the same ethnicity to feel the Palestinian human suffering. We just need to be humans in order to extend our solidarity to Palestinians. And I'm sure that this is something that can be built in Turkey if there are enough Turkish and Palestinian individuals who are interested and devoted to the cause of building bonds and solidarity relationships.
Also, you mentioned about a difference of religion. We know that there are many Christians in Palestine as well, but in the media, they just saw like the Muslims. How Christian Palestinians experience all this?
You know, it's difficult in Palestine to tell the difference between a Muslim and a Palestinian. I don't think that the religion is a factor that changes how people look at the situation. Within the Palestinian Muslim society, there are many non-believers or atheists or people who practice the rituals without sufficient faith, or who are faithful and don't practice the rituals. So I think that it's very colorful, the Palestinian society. And there are many Palestinian Christians who are involved, who have been involved in resistance. Certainly, the Israeli brutality doesn't distinguish between Christian and Muslim. I know many many Christian Palestinian martyrs and many Christians who spent time in prison. I don't think it has ever been an important element that changes our perspective of how we look at the reality in Palestine. Let me mention a few names of well-known Christian Palestinian figures who have been spokesmen for the Palestinian rights. Dr. Hanan Ashrawi is one of them. And Atallah Hanna, the Archbishop, Atallah Hanna. And a few more people.
Also, I want to ask you about your personal experience. You have been actively involved in supporting Palestinian rights for a long time. What was it like for you to try to speak in this area without being declared as anti-Semitic?
Well, it's a strange description for me to say that I've been involved in defending Palestinian rights, because it sounds like as if I'm someone out of Palestine. And I think I've been defending myself. I've been defending myself and my fellow Palestinians, compatriots and brothers and sisters and neighbors and friends and colleagues. So that's only normal, and I cannot imagine an alternative for this. So regardless of what names, what consequences will be for that, it is only the normal thing, the natural thing that one like me can do. I have been doing it. I think I've been doing this for so many years, but I've never been involved in any hate speech. I speak about the situation using my common sense as a person. I have moral standards that respects the humanity of everybody. I use the language of my profession as a doctor and as a mental health professional. And as far as I know that I do it for the good reason and in the good way, I don't care about what labels people give me.
Also, I want to ask you about Israel policies as desensitization through the media, because we know how they attack Gaza before, like in each 4 years, then it become in each 2 years, then the brutality is excessive, getting more and more. So it seems like a desensitization of the society of the world, basically, because they were doing like a little, there is no sound, everything in silence. So they're going further and further and further, and now it's been more than 1 year in a genocide. So how can we struggle with this?
By searching for truth and amplifying truth. I think there is in our value system as Muslims, the search for truth is a responsibility. And I want to say that in the situation of Gaza now, Israel is not only desensitizing the world, but they are blindfolding the world. You probably know that they targeted journalists. They killed more than 200 journalists in Gaza and injured many. They closed Gaza, and the only journalists that can get into Gaza are the ones who go with the approval of the Israeli military, and their reports will be checked by the Israeli military. So it's direct and blatant obscurity of reality and truth in Gaza. In reaction to that, we see citizen journalists, young people who take their mobile and try to film what's taking place. And in fact, I have a lot of respect for Al Jazeera journalists and the Palestinian young journalists who stayed in Gaza to share their part of the truth. But that's a big problem, because when they obscure the truth, they can tell whatever story afterwards, and that's an important battle in our confrontation with Israelis, how to unearth the buried truth of what's taking place in Gaza and in Palestine in general. And we hope that our friends outside Palestine will help amplifying our reality and our narrative and our truth.
We have come to the end of my questions. Now we can move on the questions of our participants. First, we will take the questions from the hall, then we can move on to the Zoom.
Thank you very much.
Positive conversation for you, and of course for you. It was great to listen to your answers and like your perspective as a Palestinian, and of course as a psychiatrist, as a doctor, as a woman, as a as a person who has a good sense of like a sense of humanity, this kind of stuff. My question is about like the support that Palestinians get in a, like from the world. There are many universities that are in the US, that are in the West, that are in Turkey, and the students of those universities, they protest, they show their resistance by social media, by like speaking of the truth and reposting all of those stuff. So I have two questions on that. First of all, like how Palestinian people see this sport, they feel that sport because they are going through a genocide. Like I don't know if it's possible to feel the sport when you are going through something like that. And also I want to ask you, like, what do you think about the, Western media, Western people, the people who have the power thinks about this resistance? Like, do you think they were expecting this kind of resistance, or they were just shocked that they have a backlash, something like this?
The resistance of the protesters in the West.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Yeah. Well, first I want to say that Palestinians feel strongly and value the international solidarity. And I have to say also that I will share my opinion. I think that it is very important at a psychological level. Unfortunately, protests in the streets don't change the political reality, but still they are very important at a psychological level. They make the Palestinians feel that their struggle is acknowledged and validated, and that they are seen. And I saw images of tents in Gaza where people in the tents, displaced Palestinians, they write thank you letters to international protesters on the tent. So the people in the most difficult situation, they appreciate this solidarity. And I think it is important and it should be maintained. I argue that it is probably not sufficient. And maybe we can take it to another level when we make it vertical, not only horizontal in the streets, but vertical within syndicates, within trade unions, within professional groups, and it can create a difference. The solidarity of legal bodies in South Africa that took the Palestinian case to the International Court of Justice is an amazing example of that solidarity. The solidarity of the networks, the global networks of mental health professionals who are in solidarity with Palestinian mental health professionals is another good example that helps us generate knowledge from the Palestinian experience, that help us challenge mainstream approaches that obscure the reality in Palestine. So it is important, and it will take a while before it can shake the positions of Western governments. I think an average Palestinian can clearly see that there are many good people in the West, but they understand that our problem is with the governments, with the ruling bodies in the West. They see them implicit in our trauma and our genocide, but they can see that there are many good people. Palestinians, across their many years of struggle, they were never involved in attacking Westerners because of the responsibility of the regime in the tragedy that came upon us. And that's a big difference between Palestinians and other groups who claim being involved in political struggle. So I think that the solidarity with Palestinians should continue and should take different shapes and should move from a horizontal level to a vertical level within professional organizations to create a bigger impact. Thank you.
Any questions? Does that work?
We hear you. You can speak.
Thank you for this very powerful speech. When you were speaking, I was thinking about our training in Turkey as psychologists. Unfortunately, it's really Western-based and truly colonial that we realize only now, maybe. So I would like to ask, what would you recommend us to read to be more informed and to do more decolonial thinking in our fields, in psychology and therapy? Is there any specific books that you would recommend us to?
I think there is a growing body of literature that challenges Western hegemony in mental health. The classic books are those of Ignatius Martin Barú in El Salvador, the author of Liberation Psychology, and Paulo Freire in Brazil, Frantz Fanon, who worked in Algeria and described the reality of racism and the political violence in Algeria. But there are new people writing, like Nimisha Patel in the UK, and many others. And I think it is, if we can create presence for this kind of thinking, and when we create room among mental health organizations for questioning mainstream, I'm sure that many people will step in and share different lessons learned from their experience working with refugees, with marginalized groups, with class, working with people across different classes. I think new information can be generated from these kind of experiences.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a nice speech. I wondered, I know there are very strong psychology movement in Israel. When 99 big earthquake, they came to Turkey. They did a lot of trainings. And I know the Jewish voice of supporting the Palestinian people. There is a Facebook group I'm following. They are mainly in America. Do you have any contact from mental health professionals from Israel supporting you?
Very, very few. I know some Israeli colleagues, but they are very few and very marginalized. Very few Israeli colleagues can be interested in this discourse or can support this discourse. Now, Jewish Voice for Peace, I think you meant that group in the US. They don't even identify with Israel. They consider like they are Jewish, but they don't identify with Israel at all. But within the Israeli society, I think it's clear for me that the Israeli left is diminishing and disappearing. And within the Israeli left, even in better times when they were more visible, within the Israeli left, we need to ask some decisive questions, because many people like to call themselves as part of the left, but within the left there is a Zionist left, and a Zionist left is not less complicit in the dark reality that they have created for Palestinians. It is clear that the left is diminishing. Maybe they have more presence in human rights organizations than in the social presence on reality. Like you will hear of some important organizations that have contributed to human right, to revealing human right violations, like B'Tselem, like Pikati. But on the ground, very few Israelis can challenge their government or change the status quo.
May I ask a question? Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
We are very happy. Okay, it's not working yet.
Yeah, so if you can speak a little bit louder.
Okay.
for the Zoom.
Okay. Doing my best. We are very happy for having here you. You know very well there is an ongoing violation, violence, and hostility against all Palestinian people. This is an ongoing genocide. I wonder, what do you think about where and when it will be ended? What do you think about this huge and unbearable violence and genocide?
I wish I have the answer for this question. I wish I have the answer.
Because I'm asking, it's a kind of opening a debate before this question. I think if I understand you correctly, you say we need a different psychiatry, psychotherapy perspective against Western scientists' definitions, classifications, against DSM, maybe. You mentioned agency and also some political categories such as colonialism, decolonialism, etc. Some old Marxist concepts, imperialism, it's the concept of Vladimir Lenin. I wonder, your speech is wonderful because I think you have a very broad perspective on it. If we focused on restricted some Westerners DSM idea, we don't understand the situation and we cannot formulate new politics for psychiatrists, psychotherapists, psychoanalysts, etc. I wonder, what do you think about or new politics of psychiatry? How do you describe this?
Well, of course, I think the hypothesis, this is part of the domination. What is understood to be international psychiatry is developed mainly in the West, where power structures don't have a heavy weight on the shoulders of the individual. In places, I'm sure it's not only Palestine, Sudan, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, the indigenous people in the West, the blacks in places where there is racism. What's happening in the society, the power structure can create heavy weight that intertwines with their personal stories, that makes their personal stories worse. I want to give you an example of my clinical practice, how we feel this strongly in the cases of the individual. A few examples. I worked 1 or 2 days in my clinic following the assassination of the Lebanese resistance leader Hassan Nasrallah. Out of 16 patients who come to see me to talk about their personal problems, 5 chose to speak about their grief reaction and their loss in reaction to his death. So the general, the political superimposes on the personal. I observed over the past year that I see more women who are pregnant or postpartum who come and express feeling of guilt or regret because they are bringing vulnerable kids to this reality. So they view their pregnancy or bringing children with the dark lenses of the genocide, and they feel guilty about bringing children. I observed, I observed some people who come for weight loss problem and inability to eat or refusal to eat, but these children don't suffer from eating disorder. They attribute their change in eating behavior to images of weaponized starvation in Gaza. One girl, 11-year-old, her father told me that she becomes hysterical whenever he brings fruit or chocolate or nuts or meat. She's hoarding food cans and she's hoarding water in her bedroom in preparation that the genocide will come to the West Bank. So there is no escape for us clinicians if we don't see what's going on outside our clinics. We will not understand the clinical presentation. We have to do it. And I'm sure that in every society where power structure is so cruel and violent and it impacts the life of individuals, you will see that reflected in the clinical population that we see. So we are obliged to do this, this thinking, which means theorization and practice. And then the practice will make us reflect again in the theory and see its applicability. Another example from Western psychiatry, we all studied the attachment theory of Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth. They suggest that if you have a secure relationship with the caregiver, you develop the internal working model that helps you to navigate your world. And then you will become like your personality, you will have no problem in personality and you will relate well to your people. But imagine that you are you come from a disadvantaged group, a Black person in a racist West, or a refugee in a community that is not welcoming. Even if you have the best responsive mother, the world is not available for you. So the attachment theory does not explain our future attachment style and the internal working model. So we need to question the theories. We need to question these theories and their applicability in our reality.
Hello, thank you so much for being here with us today, and I would like to thank the Mental Health Network for organizing all of this. I'm currently a board member of Students for Justice in Palestine and we hold a lot of events that we try to amplify the voices of Palestinians. But my question here is, how can we as organizers with no professional mental health background hold a safe space in the right way
especially that many individuals in the club who are not Palestinians, but still grieve this catastrophe, give them this safe space without discarding their grief, because there's this mentality of only if you're going through this, you're allowed to grieve. You're not allowed to grieve when you're in the safe of your house about what's happening.
You don't need to be a mental health professional in order to understand human suffering. You don't need to be a psychiatrist in order to understand that what's taking place in Palestine and other places in the world where power structure is crushing human being is unacceptable, and it causes a lot of pain and loss. And I want to tell you that I contributed to developing the health system, the mental health system in Gaza. I used to go there several times, and we established a modest and functional system over the past years, where we rely on the training of medical doctors, nurses, school counselors, and teachers. We established a functional school mental health program. 1/3 of the Palestinian population go to school, are in school, are school kids. And I saw within the first couple of weeks how this system was crushed completely. And I was shocked. My role in Palestine is not only a clinician, but I'm also a policymaker in mental health. So when I saw how the system that we contributed to building it was crushed completely, the only psychiatric hospital, every community mental health center where 40,000 patients relied on the system, it was completely crushed, and people were left without any contact with their doctors, without any medications. Our colleague, the head of the psychiatric hospital, Dr. Abdullah Jamal, wrote a paper in the Lancet describing how he has to dig under the rubble of the hospital in order to get a pack of medication for an agitated patient. But anyway, in that shock, I just watched what people do to help themselves. We started receiving videos of children chanting national songs, young girls gathering and teaching each other certain verses from the Quran that support their sumud, support their steadfastness in difficult time. A young man who grew seeds into seedling and was distributing to people and encouraging them to plant their vegetables to face starvation. So I want to say that I learned from people. We mental health professionals, we should not come across this tragedy assuming that we know better. People know better. And we should be humble and observe what they do to help themselves and try to copy them, try to facilitate their efforts. Their organic ways are more suitable for them and they meet their needs at this time. We should be catalysts and facilitators for this organic process of healing. And I think when students get together and meet and dialogue and mobilize and create a momentum, you are teaching us mental health professionals a lesson. We shouldn't be there to lead this process. This process should be led by you. And what I'm saying is not far from the reality of other people in the world. Actually, Paulo Freire and Ignatius Martin Baru in Latin America, they described processes like that in which people gather and engage in a dialogue. And in that dialogue, new ideas will develop and they will restore their agency. In groups, people feel that they reconnect and they belong. We should not live this collective tragedy as individuals. We need to live it collectively, and we need to connect with other people. We need to empower each other because this is a very difficult time and we need to draw strength from others too.
Do we have any other question from the hall? Okay.
Call their names first and then after the written ones.
Okay. Tuba, you can take the questions from Zoom. We are listening.
Okay, Nabiha, you can ask if you want. And open your mic.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for this wonderful session. I'm a clinical psychology student and an aspiring mental health professional from India. I just wanted to know how can professionals like me contribute to supporting Palestinians, especially like if specifically I could say how could we assist through initiatives such as creating support groups or maybe conducting essential research, something like what we can do.
In India, you don't yet have an India-Palestine mental health network, right?
Yeah, we don't have that.
Maybe you should start by encouraging some other colleagues to create the India-Palestine mental health network. And then again, within a group, you will generate new ideas about helping. What we need, I cannot tell you what is within your capacity, but I can tell you what do we need. We need to get our reality out. We need to stop this masking and obscuring of the Palestinian reality. We need help in generating more knowledge and wisdom from the Palestinian painful experience and sharing it with a wider audience. An audience that, when it is not exposed to the Palestinian narrative, can easily buy into the dark, black propaganda that created all that, that paved the way for all these atrocities and genocide to take place. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have another question. Ola, you can open your mic and ask if you want.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Can you speak louder?
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, thank you so much for this talk. It was really, really insightful. Second, I have a question that was basically based on the fact that you mentioned how in Palestine, people who are like not from Gaza, like people in the West Bank, they will go through something that is like silencing their pain because they feel that it's not as important or not as like real as what's happening in Gaza right now. And my question is basically how like this also applies to people or like Palestinians who are not even born in Palestine, where they never even stepped foot there. They've never lived or experienced it. And there's always this term of like survivor guilt that we like use to describe how like it could feel or it means to witness everything that's happening and not know or what to do or just feel helpless with it. And I guess I just want to ask if like there's any way to because you mentioned how there should be a new rules for or policies for mental health policies for that is just like not westernized, and I think this is one of them. I think that the idea that people who are like they feel like this is their land, but they don't know how to express it because they don't feel like it's something that it's tangible. There's this helplessness that is very real. And I guess my question is, what's your insight on this? And like, how do people manage to express that in a way that could be like talked out loud? Because there's this thing where it's always silenced and it's always a thing where no one talks about it. And it's just like it's widely known that we know it, but we're not going to be talking about it.
Listen, the Western approach helps people to minimize their anger, to minimize their pain. They teach you anger management techniques. And the approach that is suitable for us is probably to deal with that pain, to understand it, to feel it, understand where it comes from, because it tells us something about our value system and what is being important for us and being violated now. And we need to, with that understanding, to do something about it. And I think, you know, you mentioned helplessness, guilt and helplessness. I think many people come up with these terms to express their feelings regarding what happened in Palestine. So, guilt and helplessness are trauma consequences. One of the meanings of trauma is that it is the disaster of helplessness. And trauma in our situation, in the Palestinian situation, it is deliberate, it's made deliberately to make people forced into helplessness, unable to react, because the power and the revenge is so severe, and we feel that we can do nothing about it. And I think we need to find our little actions that can liberate us from the feeling of helplessness. So the appropriate response in reaction to the pain and the anger and the guilt is to find the little actions that will liberate these feelings, liberate us from these feelings. Each one of us, according to your field of expertise or profession or risk assessment, you need to find the one thing that you can do well in order to channel your feelings about what's taking place and feel that you are not betraying your value system. And I have to say that maybe you didn't mention that, but some of the Palestinians outside, they have traumatic reactions, because they are outside Palestine because of the ethnic cleansing that happened to their grandparents in 48. Or because the reality was so harsh for them that they couldn't continue staying in Palestine. So what's taking place, like we are seeing a contemporary Nakba televised now, and it is just stirring the residual traumatic symptoms that crossed from one generation to another, generating anger, helplessness, and a lot of pain. So you should find your way to deal with it, and the appropriate action that can be a small contribution, a drop of water to nourish the Palestinian sumud and the Palestinian cause.
I mean, yes, I agree with the whole notion of acting on your feelings will liberate them. But I also, like, I kind of meant more about the identity, the struggle that Palestinians have with identifying with the Palestinians who are in the land, who are in Palestine, given that they've never even been there or never and it's definitely like generational trauma response to being, like ethnically cleansed from their own land. And I guess it's just like, I wonder what it's, how should someone go about basically knowing that their identity is not something that can be like held or has meaning or power in today's world?
First, I want to say that not only people of Palestinian descent who are abroad identify with Palestinians. Many people with a traumatic colonial history identify with Palestinians. The Irish, the South Africans, they see their history, their ancestors in the eyes of the people in Gaza now. So it is the human experience that brings this kind of identification rather than genetics or ethnicity. And this can bring feelings of pain. And I think in the case of Palestinians, because the attack and the threat is still there, maybe some people want to seek, as a strategy of survival, they don't want to declare that they are Palestinians. They don't want to be active in the service of Palestinians because Palestinians are still being threatened, even if you don't connect directly with the people in the land, but somehow you are sympathetic. And we see that many people from the solidarity movement, even when they are not Palestinians, they are being policed and attacked. They pay fines. They face difficulties in their universities. So that's part of the price of identifying with Palestinians, unfortunately. That's why I say you need also to measure the personal risk that you are taking when you plan your solidarity with Palestinians. I don't know if I answered your question, but those are my mental associations in reaction to your question.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you all for your interest, but we need to end our conference for today. So this is the last question that we take from Zoom. We would like to express our endless thanks to Dr. Jabr for sharing her valuable knowledge, views, and especially experience with us today. I cannot tell you how precious it is us to be gathered here today for Palestine and experience this solidarity. Our journey is long, we know that, and we are proud to be walking within this path with valuable pioneers like you. I would like to commit from here again that we will continue to walk as a Turkey-Palestine mental health network in this path. By saying not until Palestine is free, because we know that it's not enough. We will work for Palestine for forever. And I want to give this speech to Samah Jabr for the closing.
Well, thank you very much for making the space for us to gather and talk.
müssten das auf jeden Fall bei der Eingangstour haben.
Thank you for your kind words and for all the efforts that you are doing here. And please know that this is seen and appreciated by Palestinians. Thank you very much.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but can I ask a quick question at least? Hello?
We have a gift for you.
Thank you very much.
As a sign of our
Thank you very much.
For you and Vanis, for
thank you
Zeynep.
very much.
For you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you very much.
I'm glad you could arrange for this in a short time. And it's really interesting to see all these colleagues. Thank you very much for being here. I just want to say goodbye to our colleagues on Zoom.
Thank you for your participation.
Thank you very much. Yeah, sure.
I don't do dinner together, but like this slide.
Okay, pleasure.
It's okay.
We want to give visibility for this